Hi, I'm Alan Smith. I'm here today with a few friends to help you get in the spirit of the season, the harvest season. This is a time of year when we can enjoy some of nature's most beautiful displays. Farmers and gardeners across the country are bringing in a bountiful harvest. It's also a time for us to sit back and relax with friends and relatives. So it makes sense to have plenty of tasty treats on hand and festive decorations. Today we're going to visit with a friend of mine who's a creative organic farmer. He'll show us how he turns nature's autumn gifts and a little scrap lumber into whimsical beasts to charm children of all ages. Then we'll create a crafts project on a smaller scale that you can do at home. We'll travel to the land where giant pumpkins grow, and I'll tell you the story of how we came by one of the most treasured staples of the holiday table, the pumpkin pie. We'll see how one farm family nestled deep in the Ozarks is keeping alive a decades-old method of raising turkeys and adding a few new twists of their own. But of course, you'll need something to go along with that bird, so I'll share with you an easy-to-prepare recipe for one of my favorite side dishes. And finally, we'll find out how this tradition of Thanksgiving got started in the first place. So don't go away. Since I was a little kid, I always got excited about the fall of the year. I liked everything about it, except giving up my summer and having to go back to school. I guess some things never change because it's still one of my favorite seasons. It's a time of county fairs, giant pumpkins and changing leaves, all signs of the harvest season. It's also a time to get creative and have some fun with all of this beauty. So just for kicks, Mark Marino and I got together and made one of his harvest horses. Now these braces will keep it from being wobbly.
Right, these are really important to have on there, so once you add your corn over the top, it actually hides the braces, but they make it so the structure is stout and you can actually get up and ride the horse.
What you've got here really is a big sawhorse.
Basically, it's just your sawhorse design in a little larger scale, and it's beefed up here with an extra 2x4, but the beauty of these is you can use any kind of scrap lumber.
I can see where these would be really popular with the kids.
Oh yeah, kids love them. They all think they're real ponies. The little kids think that.
So you start with these bundles of corn. You find that works better, right?
Right, I like to start with little bundles.
So you've put about 10
About
stalks?
10, yeah.
You actually use more of these corn stalks than you might think.
You probably need about 20 bundles or so just to make sure.
Right.
But that, you could get that from your average garden patch, really.
Okay, Mark, looks like we got the back legs underway. What next?
I think we ought to do the front legs and then we'll do the body after that.
Okay, all 4 legs first then. That's the best order.
Yes.
Okay.
You know, the other thing too is you don't have to use corn. You can use rushes or cattails or any type of organic grassy material you have around
Anything
your garden.
you can bundle.
Exactly.
Sure. Now, have you ever painted these?
Yes, I have painted them. You could use any kind of paint, and you can make a pinto or a Appaloosa or dapple. What we could do some on the neck and a little bit on the head.
Coming right on down to the nose here.
Nice job on that nose there. So why don't we grab a couple more bundles and start filling out the body then?
Okay, give it a belly.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Seeing the way you use the old tack, or seeing the way you use the blankets and saddles and bridles and so forth makes me wish I'd kept all of mine from when I was a kid.
Yeah, that's what the beauty of old barns, too. You never know what you're going to find in there. Then we have this loose part here we can just bring up and be part of, we can add some string and have it be part of the neck to start fleshing it out.
Sure. Come up to the side there. Now Mark, once we get all of the corn on here, it seems like the fun part is going to be decorating the horses.
Right, the decorating is what keeps you coming back, because there's so many wonderful things from the garden that you can use to embellish these with that every year for me it's different. I've never made one the same, and it's always kind of a fun puzzle to figure out every year what you can use to make for the eyes or the mouth or the tail or the mane. All right.
Yeah, I think he looks great.
Ready to roll.
Yep. Now I'm going to ride off into the sunset. If watching us put together the harvest horse inspired you, here's a simple autumn crafts project you can do at home. The fall is one of my favorite times of the year. I really get into decorating for it. And what could be more appropriate for the fall than a horn of plenty or cornucopia? Now this may look difficult to make, but it's actually very simple. I started by cutting a 2-foot by 2-foot piece of 1-inch mesh chicken wire. Then I rolled it diagonally from one corner to the other, creating a cone. To hold it together, I bent the ends of the wire into the body and curved the closed end into the classic cornucopia shape. For the open end, I just rolled back the edges to form a lip. I made the opening large enough to hold an 8-inch container. Now, since this is going to be a door hanging, I wanted to make sure that the container was lightweight and waterproof, so I chose a paper mache liner. Now, with the frame made, I'm ready to cover it. I'm using sheet moss and attaching it with hot glue, and I found that smaller pieces of moss are easier to handle. As a final touch, I wrap the entire horn in grapevine. This gives it a nice accent and helps to secure the moss. And I just use some hairspray to keep the moss from shattering. Now I'm ready to really get creative and fill this with all sorts of things that symbolize the harvest season, like dried fruits and vegetables, as well as living things like kale, mums, and ivy. I begin by placing floral foam in the container, and I push it toward the back to leave room in the front for other things. Then I secure it with floral tape. I build the arrangement from the back toward the front, using tall spiky things like Russian sage. For the larger living things, I moisten the roots, slip them in a plastic bag. This will help them last longer, and they'll fit easier into the arrangement. Now I've filled in with gourds, corn, dried flowers, and ivy across the front to cascade. Now it's ready to hang on the front door. It'll be fresh and beautiful until I'm ready to hang that Christmas wreath. I don't know what it is about pumpkins, but they have this way of capturing our imagination, especially when they become giants like these. This one alone weighs 230 pounds, but it's actually small compared to some of the pumpkins they're growing here. Tom Borchard has been growing giant pumpkins for over 20 years and has developed quite a reputation for producing some record-breaking heavyweights. So Tom, what do you think something like this weighs?
Well, I'm hoping it'll do 600 now, and if it's got 8 or 10 days to go, they usually go 8 to 10 pounds a day, so it could hit 700.
8 to 10 pounds a day.
Mm-hmm.
My gosh, it's a whopper. I mean, this is really impressive, Tom, but do you think you'll grow a larger one?
One day I'll hit 1,000 pounds.
Great.
I keep trying till I do.
And each year they get a little larger.
Yeah, most of the time, yeah. Each year
Yeah.
they increase a little.
Right.
So I'll get there.
It's amazing what just the right amount of sunlight, water, and fertilizing can produce. 600 pounds and still growing. Now, while these giants are fascinating and fun to look at, some of their smaller cousins are actually more suitable for making pumpkin pie. But did you ever wonder how this tradition of making pumpkin pies got started? It has always fascinated me how the pumpkin has come to represent the harvest season. What Thanksgiving feast would be without turkey, cranberries, and of course the pumpkin? When you think about it, all of these foods are perfect for a great American holiday because they're all American natives. And as far as we know, all were present at the first Thanksgiving feast. Now when it comes to creating that classic dessert of the day, the pumpkin pie, this little guy, the New England pie pumpkin, has been front and center with cooks for years. So what distinguishes it from the myriad of pumpkins now grown, all of which are edible, by the way? Well, these have a particular dense, sweet flesh that's packed with that unmistakable pumpkin flavor. It's interesting that the first pumpkin pie, if you can even call it that, was actually a whole pumpkin with the seed removed. Then the cavity was filled with honey, milk, and spices. Then the whole thing was cooked in hot ashes. Now, most recipes today call for the pulp of the pumpkin, which is easily prepared from the rind. You can boil it in water until it's soft, or bake it in the oven with the cut face down for 45 to 50 minutes at 325. Then just peel off the skin and mash the rind with a potato masher, or put it in a food processor. That's all it takes to have plenty of fresh pumpkin on hand for holiday pies, muffins, and breads. Thanksgiving just wouldn't be the same without this classic American flavor. It's believed that much of what we enjoy today for Thanksgiving was enjoyed several hundred years ago at the first feast, things like pumpkin, corn, and wild game. The wild turkey must have astonished early colonists. They were everywhere, large and meaty, and they ran in big flocks, but very nervous and jumpy birds. You'll be glad to know that the same wild turkey that our ancestors knew is still alive and well. In fact, it's being bred back into the birds being grown domestically these days. And this is what we have here. If there was a symbol of Thanksgiving, it would have to be one of these, but this is no ordinary turkey. In fact, this one is really pretty lucky since it's not on someone's dinner table, and it's been raised in a very unique way. Raising them on pasture like this is a spin on the free-range idea, except this goes one step further. It sort of serves as a mobile corral that protects the birds and keeps them under control, but also allows them to feed on fresh green grass daily. At Blue Mountain Farm, in the heart of the Ozarks, Luke, Cindy, and Rebecca Elliott are bringing this traditional and sustainable way of farming into the future.
We actually call this field grazed, which is distinct from free range. And what makes this method really different is that we move the pens every day, so the birds always have fresh grass.
Moving them is simple. This entire coop can be rolled forward by a single person. It's made of lightweight materials and it has wheels at the rear.
They're a very lightweight pen, and that's part of the design. It's one of those things that we really are trying to design it so that a woman with maybe 2 kids can be at home on the farm and actually do this operation and make an income. So she doesn't have to leave or go to work anywhere. So that's the whole design that we're working on with this process.
An added benefit to this controlled grazing is the poultry litter. You see, it's loaded with nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, all the things that make our garden grow. And it can turn this pasture green seemingly overnight.
The whole issue of waste removal, we don't have to deal with that here. The birds take care of that themselves, and it's no cost to us. We get basically a free fertilizer on our pasture, which really fits into our broader vision of sustainable farming. And this is not a new idea. This is an idea that comes from the 30s and 40s of early poultry raising, and simply was lost as things became more industrialized.
Well, it's interesting that some of the breeds that are well known to poultrymen, I think, were developed in the 40s, weren't they? Like the broad-breasted bronze.
Right, yeah, and it's real interesting. You know, we didn't want to raise a broad-breasted turkey, and that's really the accepted turkey because it has a lot of meat on it, and but it's also a turkey that's been so genetically altered, genetically bred, to get fat really quick,
Yeah.
to put on a lot of
Right.
meat really fast. And these birds grow a lot slower. It's a more natural process. We don't rush them. A big part of our growing process is just to let them take their time.
How would you rank the taste comparison?
Absolutely unbelievable. It's unlike turkey that you've ever tasted. Unless you've tasted a turkey off of the farm like this, it's completely different.
So the flavor really is enhanced by all of the grazing these birds do day to day.
Yeah, what really makes these birds taste good is being out here eating fresh green grass, sunshine, fresh air. Taking care of these, it's really quite easy, and the way we set this system up is so that it is a family-based system. So we set it up so Cindy, Rebecca, and myself could really do this, and Jeremy being here helping is a real plus to us this year.
Well, do you ever get attached to them? They're really lovable. Look at them, they're coming up talking to you.
Of course, I have them all named, but when it comes to processing time, I also know the customers who get the birds, and that's who we really become attached with. There's a real relationship developed through that we're able to deliver these birds right before Thanksgiving to our customers, so they're getting a fresh bird.
Really, it's really a return to what the family farm really is. That's what this is about.
Few things complement the flavor of roasted turkey better than this easy winter squash recipe. It's always interesting to me how certain produce, like these winter squash, are so durable. Many of them, if handled correctly, can literally last all winter. These squash also supply us with a rich source of vitamin A. And in the case of this butternut squash, lots of beta-carotene. Just look at its bright orange flesh under the skin. Butternut squash is one of those signature flavors of autumn, particularly when you combine it with some savory herbs and honey. Now this recipe is so simple, and the way the honey caramelizes with the squash takes the flavor right off the charts. Butternut has always been one of my favorites, but I've found that any of the winter squash are just as delicious prepared this way. I'm starting with 2 pounds of winter squash. That's 2 squash that are medium to large like these, and I'm splitting them in half. You'll want to remove the seeds, but you don't have to bother peeling them. Then cut the squash into 1/4-inch slices. Transfer the pieces into a bowl and thoroughly coat each piece with honey. You'll need about 4 tablespoons. Next, overlap the slices in a shallow baking dish and drizzle the remainder of the honey over the top. Dot 4 tablespoons of salted butter over the squash and sprinkle it with 1 teaspoon of chopped fresh rosemary. Bake this at 375 degrees for about 40 minutes. Butternut squash served this way can make a superb addition to any fall menu. We've been celebrating Thanksgiving in this country for a long time. In fact, it got started around 1623 at Plymouth Plantation, but there were a few things different about that celebration than the one we enjoy today. You see, that one lasted for 3 days, and it didn't occur in November. It happened in July. Now, the history doesn't stop there. 166 years later, President Washington decreed that the 26th day of November would be a national day of Thanksgiving for our victory in the war for American independence. Then after that, the tradition continued, except each state sort of adopted its own day for Thanksgiving, until 1863, when Abraham Lincoln decided that in the midst of the Civil War, we needed a day of national Thanksgiving to help unify our war-torn country. So he made the 4th Thursday in November the holiday. Now the story goes on. In 1939, President Roosevelt bumped the date back a week so there'd be a full extra week of shopping before Christmas. Apparently Congress didn't like this, and they moved it back to the date that Lincoln set, which is the day we celebrate. Of course, no matter the date, Thanksgiving has always been our national day of celebration of this country's rich bounty. These guys are celebrating too. because they've gotten by one more year without being the topic of conversation at the dinner table. Have a happy Thanksgiving. From the garden, I'm Alan Smith.
In this garden I dream of a bed of flowers. Bluebirds sing of the beauty all around us. And every time the sun comes out, I can't help but smile. Oh, no, I can't help but smile.